first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honour and privilege to be here on this stage. I'm so excited. So Pete's introduced me to you. So just to sort of give my spin on it, I'm a scholar of early modern disability, and I've written about lots of different kinds of disability. But the thing that draws them all together for me is the idea of rethinking the norm. So what's taken for granted about what human beings are like, what they can do, what they should look like. And for me, disability is about rethinking what's assumed about variation from these unspoken norms. So, and that slippage between something being different and something being morally good or desirable or intelligent or any of these other values. So what I wanted to do today was to bring some ways of looking at meaning and madness through that disability perspective that I'm hoping will open up your enjoyment of the play even further, whether you've seen this fascinating production that they have going on at the moment already or whether you are going to see it. And I would really strongly recommend that you do. It features some extraordinary performances from actors who are absolutely at the top of their game. So I'm hoping what I've got to say will kind of complement and extend your enjoyment of this production and of this incredible play. What I'm going to do is focus on the kinds of language that are used in King Lear and in the historical period more generally that deal with mental health and illness, and by extension the mind itself. So what's implied about the mind? Is it seen as part of the body or something separate to the body? What are the qualities that it is supposed to have, and what does it mean for it to somehow go wrong or not be doing what it's supposed to be doing? So the place that I'm going to start is with a very simple single syllable word, and that word is fit, F-I-T. And I've also put on the slide other forms of that word, so fitting or unfit or fitful. And so as we start, I just wanted to get a sense of what do you think the meaning of the word is for you? Is it a verb? Is it a noun? What does it signify? If anyone's brave enough to sort of shout something out, please tell me. What do you think? Healthy. Okay, great. So fit and healthy. So to be fit means to be healthy. We will definitely be talking about that.
Right. In English slang, it's also to be attractive.
Yeah. Well fit, one might say. Okay, so something to do with health. That's the sort of first thing that comes to mind. Clothing. Interesting. Okay, so does your clothing fit you? Is it the right size? Is it the right shape? Is it comfortable? Great. Those two things will turn out to be connected. Yes. An agitated condition. So something very different. Yeah, so a noun, having a fit, or maybe partly fitful, something to do with that meaning. Okay, yeah.
Appropriate.
Yes. Okay, so appropriateness, fitting, fit for purpose, fit for the job. Yeah, something that's appropriate. Anything else?
Something that slots in. It fits.
Yeah, like a jigsaw piece, or something that's sort of made to be there. It's just right. Okay. Well, luckily you've said all the things I want you to say, so we can move on. So yeah, what I'm going to do is kind of focus on two kind of clusters of meaning. Now, this is a huge simplification, okay? If you go to the Oxford English Dictionary and you look up this word, you'll find dozens of definitions and sub-definitions. But what I want to do is focus on these two clusters. And we've got two different kind of groups. So on the one side, we've got this sense of appropriateness. So we've had things like healthy mentioned, right-sized, decorum, correctness, and also that can also be a sort of verb. So you can shape something, you can fit something. So it's sort of a bit malleable as well. So something about shape and appropriateness. And then on the other side, we've got things to do with this idea of the fit. the fit, an epileptic fit, let's say, or a fit of the giggles, or a fit of jealousy. So what we're talking about here is something that is discrete and time-bound. So we will find that in addition to those medical meanings, it also, this is probably a slightly older meaning, means a kind of period of conflict or a period of struggle. And then probably the least familiar meaning to us is that of a sort of discrete section of a piece of music or a dance or poetry. So like a verse might be a fit of verse. By far the most common use of the word fit in the early modern period is in that sense of appropriateness, right? So is it fit? Is it right? Is it appropriate? And the word is used 11 times in King Lear, and all but one of those instances are something to do with that cluster of appropriateness. So obviously we'll be coming back to that exception, but I wanted to start off with those examples which are talking about something being fitting, appropriate, right, good and proper, yeah? And this is my first example, and I think just before I start the analysis, I want to say this kind of indicates something to us about the thematic importance of the idea of fitness as appropriateness. So keep that in mind as we go. So, okay, we're right at the beginning of the play. On the slide, I've got a picture of a kind of 19th century drawing of Cordelia, a painting of Cordelia. And this is the moment really near the beginning of the play where Lear has asked his daughters, which of you, shall we say, doth love us the most? And poor Cordelia has to stand there and listen to her sister's excessive declarations of devotion. And then when it's her turn to answer, she refuses to play that game. She simply tells her father that she loves him as much as she is supposed to. I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less. And of course, Lear kind of obsesses over the no more part of that, when the rest of the play suggests that the no less part is the important bit, and he's sort of misunderstood. When asked to elaborate, this is where she uses the word fit. So she articulates this kind of quid pro quo vision of daughterly obligation. And this is what I've got written on the slide. She tells him, "You have begot me, bred me, loved me. I return those duties back as our right fit." So there's an implied kind of quantification here, which I think can be a bit off-putting, as if you could measure the amount of love that your father gave you and then make sure that you repay him exactly the same amount when it's your turn. But I think it makes sense if you frame it more as saying that excess is as bad as deficiency. And this is a really important idea across early modern philosophy, and they get it from Aristotle. So what you're not looking for something to be the most. What you want is the golden mean. You want the balance in the middle of not too much and not too little. So the sort of Goldilocks principle. So I guess in modern terms, we might say that Cordelia is trying to draw healthy boundaries with her father, you know, and saying, I love you as is fit, not I don't love you too much. It's right, it's fit, it's appropriate. And that also implies that there's a kind of external standard or principle that you can apply to this situation. And that gives you a sort of reassuring clarity that, yeah, there is a benchmark of something that everybody knows, this is how you're supposed to do it, and that's what you do. So alongside there's a kind of inflexibility, but there's also a reassuring kind of clarity to it. So this sense that there is some kind of external social standard is also present in my second example. So again, I've just got some Victorian illustration of the play, don't worry about it if you can't see it. The quotation is from where Edmund, the villain, is concluding his dastardly soliloquy to the audience, and he scoffs at the thought of conforming to social expectations. Especially the social expectations which mean that because he's the bastard son and he is the younger son as well, he's not, in the usual run of things, going to inherit his father's lands and title. He's not going to stand for that. He says, "Let me, if not by birth, have lands by wit, all with me's meet that I can fashion fit. So he's going to use wit and cunning to get what he wants. And in doing so, he's taking control over the social protocols that dictate what is meet, what is appropriate, what is fitting. And what's fit then, it seems, is something that can be shaped and changed, like we were saying earlier about clothes. You know, you can adjust them to fit. And so he's taking a very different approach to Cordelia, because he's saying that rather than fitting himself to his social role, he is going to reshape society to fit him. So what is fit, meet, appropriate, socially acceptable? These are all standards that the play tests and breaks, exploring what happens when we just don't do what is fit. What if we just say no? What if we just don't? Let's see what happens. So all of that, like I said, I think is a key concern of the play. Fitness as appropriateness. Why is that important? And what happens when it sort of goes out the window? Okay, so I did hint earlier that there was a slightly different use of the word fit in the play, and that's what I want to talk about now. So the picture is of the famous Paul Scofield Lear from the 1960s, directed by Peter Brook. Again, it's just an illustration, but it's quite a striking image. The moment that we're talking about here is when characters are not behaving as they're supposed to. They're not meeting Lear's expectations. And at this moment, he uses illness as an explanation to try and understand what's going on. So by this point, Lear has relinquished his authority as king, but he still expects that even as he is living in semi-retirement, he's still going to be treated with the same level of respect fitting for a king, or, you know, a member of the royal family at the very least. So when his son-in-law Cornwall, or in this production, that function is taken on by Regan, when this character doesn't immediately agree to meet with him, he's initially very angry, but then he checks himself and thinks, this is so bizarre, this is so rude, there's got to be some other reason for it. So he says, maybe he's not well. Infirmity doth still neglect all office whereto our health is bound. We are not ourselves when nature, being oppressed, commands the mind to suffer with the body. I'll forbear, and am fallen out with my more headier will to take the indisposed and sickly fit for the sound man. There is so much really interesting language here. Lear is trying to rationalise this experience, trying to work out what is happening in front of him. And he's using generalisations and beliefs about social behaviour and expectations, and also about human bodies and illness. One key idea here that we're going to come back to is that when the mind is in the state of illness, we are somehow not ourselves. And this is like a kind of common expression, I'm not feeling myself, or you're not yourself today. But when you think about it, it's an extremely weird thing to say. It disrupts identity and ontology with a paradox, because you can't ever not be yourself. So there's something peculiar and unsettling about separating the sickly fit, this period of illness, from the sound man. And I think this is an early hint as to the really frightening power of madness in this play, because it seems to separate a person from themselves. For now, the important thing I want to highlight is that it's a framing that separates out a temporary spate of bad behaviour as a fit. It's a transient state, it's out of the norm, out of character, and it's not to be taken as an indication of reality or truth. And indeed, it would be unfair to do so, says Lear. So what's emerging here is this intimate link between ideas about sanity and insanity, and acceptable and unacceptable behaviour, or appropriate and inappropriate behaviour, and that those ideas are subject to change. There's no symptom that is inevitably and always definitively mad. It depends on why, where, who, how, and so on. Madness is produced by the combination of behaviour and the surrounding context and reaction to it. So I'm going to turn briefly for some support here to some scholars whose work has explored these shifting meanings of madness over time. So Stephen Harper, for example, argues that madness exists at the crossover between biology and culture. So what he's getting at there is that there are inner biological processes that we have no control over, that have always been part of human experience, but our understanding of those processes and what they mean has changed radically. One example might be hearing voices. So in different times and places, that is considered absolutely pathological, dangerous and terrifying. In other places, it might be a sign of spiritual revelation or contact with higher truths. And in other places, it might just be no big deal at all, just not even something to comment on. So this brings me to that example of hearing voices is something that Catherine Hodgson looks at in her book. So this book, Madness in 17th Century Biography, I highly, highly recommend. It's a case study of writings left by individuals who had been diagnosed as mad in the 17th century. So this is what they said about themselves. And so it's some of the closest sources that we have to the voices and experiences of real mad people from Shakespeare's time. And like I said, some of the case studies she looks at were individuals who heard voices, and that's seen in a very different way as to how we might see it. And so she talks about how, and this is the quote I've got here, different ideas of the self emerge over time, so too will different ways of being mad. And then finally, my last sort of, in my little army of supporters here, my last friend is Roy Porter, who, if you are at all interested in anything about the history of madness, or rather histories of madness, he's absolutely someone you should read. Really, really interesting. And he argues that psychiatry is just one framework of knowledge that we can apply to help us explain what we encounter. So he says, it is not, after all, mad people who are the invention of psychiatrists, but only the ways of classifying them. Okay, so psychiatry sort of retrospectively tells us what it is we're looking at, but mad people have always been there. Just the way we look at them has changed massively. Okay, so I want to get back to the sickly fit, because I suspect that you might be thinking, why are you talking about madness? He said he's sick. It's a disease of the body. Why would that necessarily mean that he would be mad? But I'm going to argue that for Lear, mental and physical suffering are not only linked, there is very little distinction between them at all. And that's consistent with the framework of early modern medicine more generally. So to illustrate this, I want to turn to a play called The Comedy of Errors, which, not coincidentally, is also coming to this theatre. I'm interested in this part. I'll tell you about it in a second. I need to kind of set it up because I can't expect any of you to have seen it recently. So you've got the classic setup of mistaken identity in this play, right? Which means that characters are confronted with mad-seeming behaviour. It's all dramatic irony because we know that there's two sets of identical twins and they've just got the wrong twin. Nobody is really having a fit at any point. But in the example that I want to share, one of these hapless twins has taken refuge in a religious house, and the abbess of the religious house is a sort of medical authority as well as the kind of keeper of the door. And so when Adriana, who thinks that the guy hiding inside is her husband, comes and wants to get him out, the abbess actually scolds her because she's saying, you are the person who's caused this. So what's the cause of madness here? She says, it seems his sleeps were hindered by thy railing, and thereof comes it that his head is light. Thou say'st his meat was sauced with thy upbraidings. Unquiet meals make ill digestions. Thereof the raging fire of fever bred, and what's a fever but a fit of madness? Okay, so here, madness comes from the combined effects of behaviour, emotion, nutrition, and environment. The abbess's explanation is in line with a lot of medical thinking in the period, which held that bad vapours in the stomach could rise up to the brain and cause giddiness and distraction. And that's what's going on with Antipholus. Not only that, but the cause of this illness is not solely physical. There's an interaction between physical and emotional processes that suggests that it can be dangerous to have an argument at a mealtime. Okay, so just calm down, be careful. So the theory of why Antipholus seems to be mad is based in the medical orthodoxy of the time, which maybe you've heard of, maybe you've not, humoral theory, yeah? The humours, the four humours. These are 4 different types of fluid that flowed and accumulated in the body. They were blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Each fluid has different qualities, so it could be hot or cold, and it could be wet or dry. And if you combine those together in the different combinations, you've got 4 different basic personality types. Okay, so these are the four kind of temperaments of humours. So sanguine is when you've got lots of blood, right, and you're kind of hot and wet. And this means that you're brave, you're courageous, maybe you're a little bit reckless though, so it's not all good. If you're phlegmatic, then you're calmer, much, much calmer. That's kind of chilled version. But you might also be a bit passive and maybe apathetic. So, on the other hand, if you are choleric, you have a lot of yellow bile, you have a tendency to be very angry and irritable all the time. And our final sad kitten is our melancholy cat, who black bile, cold, dry, bit sad, probably someone we'd call depressed, basically. So those are your 4 character types. And what we're talking about here are kind of your body's natural predispositions. So these physical processes and fluids in the body also create your temperament, your personality. But the humours also explain disease. So if you build up too much of one of these humours in the body, it can unbalance you. So this is where a practice like bloodletting comes from. Okay, if you've got a disease which seems to be caused by too much heat in the body, fine, cool. No, just let some blood out and you'll be right as rain. Some treatments were not quite so terrifying. You might be prescribed to eat certain kinds of food by your doctor. So again, lettuce as a cold food was, often prescribed as something to kind of bring your temperature down and put your body back into balance through what you eat. Okay, so yeah, the wrong kind of foods and in the wrong way can unbalance your health, and so then you would need to readjust. So this kind of inner balance is what Lear has in mind when he first articulates his own fear of being mad. He says, "Keep me in temper, I would not be mad." To temper is to tune or to balance the body's fluids for good health, to restore his natural temperament. He's probably this one, isn't he? Probably the angry cat. So he wants to get back there. And Lear draws on very similar medical explanations to the abbess when he talks about his own distress and the physical symptoms that go with it. So he says, "Oh, how this mother swells up toward my heart. Hysterica passio, down, thou climbing sorrow, thy elements below." So we've got another case here of swelling upwards, excuse me. Lear refers to the sort of vapours in the body that kind of come upwards from below. Lear refers to a specific medical condition here, hysterica passio. This is a condition which has several names. It's called the suffocation of the mother, or just the mother. And later it would just be called hysteria. Maybe some of you have heard of that. Feeling slightly hysterical myself. So all of these names refer to the supposed effects of the womb wandering around the body, giving off vapours, choking other bodily processes, and generally causing kind of fainting and fits. Okay, so in Shakespeare's time, just a couple of years before the play, it was described in a printed text written by a chap called Edward Jordan, called A Brief Discourse of a Disease Called the Suffocation of the Mother. Okay, let's just explain what mother is going on doing in these phrases. Mother is a word for womb, specifically. And that's what Lear's talking about when he says, this mother swelling up to my heart. Okay, that's really weird, isn't it? It's really strange. Why is Lear self-diagnosing with what sounds like an explicitly female medical condition? How could he have a wandering womb? Some scholars do think that it's evidence that he's losing his reason, he's deluded. But I think there's a much more interesting way to look at that. We have to remember that our categorical distinctions might not be in play here. Our understanding of the organs of the belly, it's not as well differentiated at all in the period. So I've got another supporter here, Boyd Brogan, this really, really interesting article where he talks about how the womb, the mother, it could also be used to refer to the bowels or the intestines or just this whole mess generally. It's not necessarily specifically the womb. Yeah, the tone will be raised soon. So, yeah. Certainly, in one of Shakespeare's sources for the play, the beautifully named A Declaration of Egregious Popish Impostures, this book describes a case where a man does claim to be suffering from the mother, right? So you might be saying, oh, it's a fictional character, but this is a real case of somebody who claimed to be suffering from this. And the thing that I kind of want to draw attention to about both of these source texts is that they're both debunking supernatural explanations. So the subtitle of the book on the left reads, wherein is declared that divers strange actions and passions of the body of man, which in the common opinion are imputed to the devil, have their true natural causes. Okay, so it's not the devil, it's your womb, out of control. And the book on the right here, that's describing an investigation into a series of exorcisms performed by a Catholic priest and his wicked associates. I think you can tell the angle that's being taken on exorcism in this book. The goal is to show that Catholic exorcism and Catholicism more generally is a fraud. And so the three people who underwent this exorcism confess to the author of this book that they weren't really possessed by the devil, they were just suffering from the mother. And one of those three people is the man that I was talking about. So it's clearly possible for men just as well as women to suffer from the mother. Okay, so excess humours arising from the belly are seen as a plausible explanation for a range of medical conditions and symptoms in the period. And that could include things that we see as totally separate, like epilepsy on the one hand and vertigo on the other. Just that womb, you've got to watch out. So we would think of those things as purely physical. But here, they are potentially supernatural, potentially physical, but always combining both mental and physical illness and symptoms. Okay, so far we have established that madness is a label attached to behaviour that seems socially inappropriate, and that in this period it is explained by this doctrine of the humours that might seem pretty alien, but it has left quite a few traces in our language about personality and mental health. So we might still use words like melancholy or phlegmatic, even if it's only in the spelling bee. Or a crossword or something, or Scrabble. Anyway, they do mean something different now we don't use them in the same way, but their presence in modern English is a testament to the centrality that they had in the way that people thought and talked about what we now call psychology. So, let's just be clear, humoral medicine is not useful to us now. I generally try to avoid this kind of chauvinism of the present when I'm talking about the past. But I think it's demonstrably true that modern medicine and science are better. And I just wanted to make that very clear. What I want to draw attention to instead is that humoral medicine is a system of thought. And it's a system of thought that provides an explanatory framework for understanding strange and upsetting phenomena. Why do people get sick? Why do they behave cruelly? Where do these things come from and how can they be cured? But while the play does draw on this humoral theory framework to inform some of the things that characters say to each other to explain what's happening, the play is not a medical treatise. It's interested in a broader depiction of the complex interaction of social relationships and characters and ideas and other kinds of stories. So one example is early in the play, Gloucester uses astrology to explain what's going on, refers to these eclipses, and that's why everybody's being so mean to each other. And then immediately after he does that, Edmund makes fun of him to the audience. So the play is constantly dramatizing these clashes between different systems of knowledge, the different standards that they demand, and the disintegration of systems of values, and the harsh penalties for characters who do not live up to their social roles or do not realize that their social role has changed. And so this is where I want to bring in that final and to me most intriguing meaning of the word fit, because I think a fit is also a performance of a play. Okay, so I'm going to ask Ben Jonson to help me with this one, and as some of you know, he's a particular favourite of mine. So a fit, as I hinted earlier, a fit can be a unit in music, poetry or dance, so a strain of music could be a fit. The Oxford English Dictionary offers the phrase dance a fit as an example of this kind of usage. And at the bottom here, I've got a poem, the beginning of a poem by Ben Jonson that's called A Fit of Rhyme Against Rhyme. So this is Jonson writing a poem about how embarrassing and rubbish it is that poems rhyme. Like rhyming is really bad. But what he does, of course, is he writes a poem that rhymes to criticise how silly rhyme is. And in fact, I think all of Jonson's poetry rhymes. So this is just typical. He's just totally contrary. But let's just draw attention to the title, A Fit of Rhyme Against Rhyme. So we've got a combination of those different kinds of meaning there, because it's a fit, it's like an outburst. I'm bursting with my rhyme, but also I'm enraged by it. So I'm having a fit in both senses. Even closer to how I want to use the term is the line from this epigram. So you can't see the handsome chap that I've got on the left there. That's Jonson's erstwhile collaborator, Inigo Jones. So I don't have time to go into it, but there's so much tea about Jonson and Jones and how much they hated each other. And so this epigram is about Inigo Jones. And he says, he sort of talks about how this guy got to be really popular because he impresses people. So he says, the cloth's no sooner gone, so we've no sooner finished dinner, but it gets up, that is this chap, shifting of its faces, does play more parts than the Italian could do with his door, acts old iniquity, and in the fit of miming gets the opinion of a wit. So it's supposed to be satirical. It's kind of weird because he's sort of saying he's really fun at parties, and that's why I hate him. But that's Ben Jonson for you. The thing to really focus on here is that the fit of miming is this moment where this person at a dinner party gets up and does a turn. You know, I'll do one of my impressions. And everybody's like, oh God, please let it be over with quickly. But yeah, that's your fit of miming. So it's this moment of performance. So in a period of time, in a sanctioned space, an actor or a mimic pretends to be something they're not, making the play itself, in the broadest sense, a kind of fit. And it's one that we all participate in when we attend and enjoy the wonderful work in this theatre. It doesn't always go smoothly, but generally there is a consensus between performers and audience that we will accept the terms of that unspoken agreement. So earlier we talked about madness less as a state of mind and more as an interpretation of actions in relation to the context they're in, judging between appropriateness and inappropriateness. And depending on the framework that the observer is applying, they will make the distinction between the sound mind and the sickly fit. So with our notion of the play as fit, we can see a parallel process going on in a stage production. Actors have to make madness, or indeed any other emotional state, observable to the audience. So they use physical movement, voice, gesture, all of the tools and the tricks that they can bring to bear on performance and all of those choices that they make. Their skill creates that opportunity for the audience's interpretation and understanding of that meaning. Now, the play actually gives us some fairly clear instructions on how you can play mad. And that's because when Edgar decides to disguise himself as a mad beggar, he gives this lengthy description of what he intends to do. He tells us, "My face I'll grime with filth, blanket my loins, elf all my hair in knots," so he's going to like tangle his hair, and with presented nakedness outface the winds and persecutions of the sky. The country gives me proof and precedent of bedlam beggars, who with roaring voices strike in their numbed and mortified bare arms, pins, wooden pricks, nails, sprigs of rosemary. And with this horrible object from low farms, poor pelting villages, sheep cots and mills, sometime with lunatic bands, sometime with prayers, enforce their charity. Poor Turligod, poor Tom, that's something yet. Edgar, I nothing am. Okay, so there's loads to say about madness here, and I don't want to run out of time, so perhaps if you want to hear more about some of the things he says, we can extend it in questions. What I want to draw attention to is that he's outlining for us a stereotype. Okay, this is what madness is supposed to look like and supposed to sound like, and it's pretty extreme. It's pushing towards a cliche. He's dirty, poorly clothed, inappropriately dressed for the weather. He self-harms, attacking his arms with pins and nails, and crying aloud, demanding alms and charity. So, of course, the extent to which Edgar's prescriptions are literalised in a performance is going to vary. This is how Edgar, the character, is telling us he intends to perform madness when he takes on the role of poor Tom, the bedlam beggar. So, we, the audience, know that poor Tom is in fact Edgar, and that this pretense is a survival strategy. And so, in the context of the play, that is entirely reasonable. Even the most extreme behaviours of the kind that Edgar lists, becoming almost naked, smearing himself in dirt, engaging in acts of apparent self-harm, they're not mad. They're reasonable. We understand why he's doing it. So before I wrap up, I think I just want to say that compassion in understanding what we don't understand is what I hope this play kind of pushes us towards. That we don't know what's going on with someone like Edgar, that behaviours we don't like might well have a rationale behind them that we just can't see. So acting requires the actor to imitate a self that they are not, invoking norms of behaviour that are readable as that of a type or character. So if acting is a fit, then it shares elements with Lear's notion of illness. It does make one not oneself in a way that allows license to do and say things that would not normally be acceptable. The fit's kind of discrete, time-bound period suggests that the acting self is protected from disruption by these moments of not self, because their momentary nature can be passed through without changing the subject's essential being. I'm not saying that actors don't get affected by the roles that they play, but nobody thinks, oh, that's made you a different person now. There's no identity shift. So the powerful framework of drama allows us all to participate in the meaning making that is enabled by that fit. So I think what I'd like to conclude with is to suggest that this play, and the theatre more generally, are invitations to enter into this temporary state of madness and of not self, in order to safely explore what happens when we break the rules of expectation and social protocol. And we join together in interpreting through our own frameworks of belief what meanings there might be in madness. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.